You're listening to Big World Network.
Amazing Grace, Episode 8. Written by James Hellvig, read by Meagan Hedin. Jorge rolls away from the cursing Demonis Alumno, cringing as he watches Tammy stomp on the Somalian man's groin repeatedly before moving towards Demonis. Gotta make myself more valuable. Go and get the brat away from that creep. Keeping himself below the windows, Jorge crawls quickly towards the center door. Climbing up on his knees, he peeks into the room and sees Anna kicking violently at a frowning little man who's staying just out of reach. The man's back is partially to him. Jorge enters quickly, intending to strike before he is seen. Anna's eyes shift at his entrance, and the ghoulish man whirls, snarling, brandishing a modified cattle prod. Thrusting the sharpened prongs at Jorge, his face twists into a hateful sneer. He giggles as the prongs sink into the tender flesh of Jorge's forearm, releasing the stored energy. Screaming and jerking away, Jorge stumbles awkwardly into the room, banging into a table filled with wicked-looking instruments, his arm bleeding and numb. The stench of burnt flesh cloys in his nostrils. NYC's street department crews follow the SWAT team members as they frantically set charges using detonation cords and C4, intending to clear the traffic lights and street signs. 3 explosives experts from the Delta team coordinate the efforts. NYPD officers block off the intersecting roads and establish a perimeter to keep bystanders at bay. The grim demeanor of these supervising soldiers clues their civilian counterparts to the gravity of the situation. Standing at the end of the corridor that spans the length of 2 city blocks, the SWAT team commander asks nervously, "Are you guys sure a parachute will even fit between these buildings?" Looking at the retreating crews while holding the detonator lightly in his hand, the senior Delta member answers tightly, "They'll fit." Barely. If the wind shear doesn't slam them into the sides, or each other, or shit. Taking a deep breath, he turns to look at the SWAT leader. Grinning, he continues, "Besides, we've got you guys on point. Ready your teams for breach, Commander. We'll be right behind you." Kat exits the aircraft. The comforting shock of her MC-6 canopy deploying sharpens her focus. Using her toggles, she quickly orients herself to the LZ and sees the sharp flashes of explosions that ignite as one, clearing the low-level obstructions. Let's make history. Steering her chute, she descends 16 feet per second, quickly threading her way down between the buildings. Long experience and muscle memory prepare her for the landing on the rough pavement. The sheer walls of the buildings flash by, and the ground seems to rush upwards as Kat struggles to aim for the center of the 4-lane street. Her combat load of weapons and ammunition keeps her weight on the light side and allows her a non-regulation landing, maintaining her feet. Impacting lightly, Kat runs forward a few steps, bleeding off speed and hauling in her deflating chute. Craning her neck, she watches as the last members of her team glide into the LZ. Midway down the blasted street, an NYPD SWAT team breaches a target building's door, rushing in. Flaring, the sword Chinook hovers 30 feet above the building. 20 operators fast rope down, clearing the aircraft in under a minute. Immediately placing charges on the rooftop access door, the team leaders wait for the sniper overwatch to signal that their aircraft is clear before blowing the door inward. Their assault comes scant seconds after the one below. Closing the distance between them, Tammy manages to evade a quick thrust by Demonis, effectively checking the expertly reversed inward slash. Stomping, Tammy tries to crush her opponent's instep while simultaneously aiming the open cuff at Demonis' eye. By turning her foot outward and jerking her head aside, Demonis narrowly evades the blows, but she sacrifices her balance. Twisting her wrist, she flicks the razor-edged knife in a tight circle, nicking Tammy's forearm and drawing blood. Grunting, Tammy slams her steel-encased right wrist down hard on Demonis' withdrawing left hand, which is clutching the blade. She makes contact just below the bottom thumb joint, sending the tainted weapon clattering to the floor. Sliding forward, Tammy positions her left leg behind Demonis'. Using her left arm in an upward scything circle, she catches the arms dealer under the chin, slamming her jaw shut with a loud click and slamming her backwards into the unyielding tile. Demonis Illumino executes a near-perfect landing. Her chin tucked, her arms slapping at a 45-degree angle, she disperses the impact across her body as much as possible. Before she can recover, Tammy squats, driving a punch into her solar plexus. Grabbing a handful of hair in each hand, Tammy slams Demonis' head repeatedly into the ground until her eyes roll back into her head. Roughly rummaging through the unconscious woman's pockets, Tammy retrieves the second remote and, standing, rips the batteries from it before twisting the device into pieces. Turning in a rush to get to Anna, Tammy is blindsided by a blow to the side of the head that knocks her off her feet and causes her vision to blur. Looking up, she sees the angry face of the tattooed Somalian scowling down at her. Picking up the stainless steel tray, Jorge whirls around, his arms extended. Swinging with panic speed, he slams the rectangular block into the electrified prod that is still in the arms of the advancing tormentor. He makes contact, littering the floor with surgical devices. Jorge feels his hands and arms tingle and burn from the glancing discharge of the probe. Screaming in rage and terror, Jorge raises the pan above his head, bashing the back-pedaling little man repeatedly on the skull, driving him to the floor in a crumpled heap. Straddling the fallen man, Jorge rips the pan with white-knuckled intensity, driving its narrow edge into the rabid man's exposed throat. He chops rhythmically up and down, grunting with exertion. Sweat drips off the end of his nose. Seemingly far away, someone is screaming. Jorge's arms become leaden. Wheezing, Jorge drops the gore-splattered pan. The lifeless eyes of the hateful torturer stare up at him accusingly. Anna is sobbing behind him, her voice raw. Sickened, Jorge vomits. Scrambling to get off the corpse and away from the steaming mess, he stumbles to his feet, wiping his mouth on the back of his hand. Shakily, still panting, Jorge releases the clasp securing Anna's wrist, saying, "Let's get the hell out of here." Looking out the window, Anna watches as Tammy squares off with the colossal guard. Rubbing her abraded wrists, she turns back to Jorge, replying, "Not without Mother Steel." Cursing under his breath, Jorge nods. Together they move to the table, working to remove the heavy straps pinning the unmoving nun. Kat acknowledges the reports coming in as she assembles her team. They've lost 3 members to injuries on insertion. No fatalities, thank God. The building's defenders are fiercely resisting, but the assault teams are making steady progress. Gathering outside the main door, she orders her troop to split. The shortened 7-man team will reinforce the NYPD SWAT team, while she leads the remainder downstairs to the basement. The chatter of small arms fire and intermittent explosions reverberates in the building. Watching as her teammates toss concussion grenades and flashbangs down the stairwell, Kat vocalizes, "Go, go, go!" Demonis Illumino's eyes flutter open and she groans, rolling to her side, her head thrumming in time with the beating of her heart. Her stiletto lies on the cold floor, directly in her line of sight. Felt more than heard, distant rumbles alert her to the progressing assault. Crawling forward, she looks over her shoulder at the muted impacts of flesh striking flesh. She sees Tammy locked in mortal combat with the Somalian she knows as Assad. Snarling, Demonis gains her knees, filling her hand with the comforting hilt of her dagger. As rage fills her, she stands. She sees the hateful brat and Jorge feverishly working to free the nun. No, we aren't done yet. Moving through the doorway, her strength returning with each step, Demonis Illumino steps directly behind Jorge, who is hunched over the nun's feet. Grabbing a handful of his hair and jerking his head back, she plunges the blade through the side of his neck, pushing the razor-sharp blade forward. She severs Jorge's vocal cords, windpipe, and carotid arteries. Gore jets outward. Twisting the dying man's body, she sprays Anna, making the startled young woman gag and stumble backwards blindly. Demonis steps over Jorge's body as it crumples to the floor. She kicks Anna in the crotch. Doubling over, Anna crashes to the blood-soaked floor a moment before Demonis wraps Anna's hair around her fist, jerking Anna back to her feet, the knife point pricking the underside of her jaw. Hissing into her ear, Demonis tells her, "Resist and die." Pulling the miserable teen tightly in front of her, Demonis forces Anna out the side door, pushing her towards the far end of the hall where the heart of the nuclear missile waits. Behind them in the other room, Tammy screams, "Regis!"
This has been a presentation of Big World Network. Visit us on BigWorldNetwork.com for more free weekly series, or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to Big World Network.